evening. I thought by time we got out here, we would be saying good morning to you, but it looks like it is not good morning. It is actually good evening, and we're really proud of the work that we were able to get done this legislative session. As you watched the really rocky start to the beginning of the session, making history in a number of different ways with the only tied legislature for the second time in history, and the way we were able to navigate through that. As you saw, the co-chairs, when we went back to that after being restored to that tie, and then the work that was done, our priority, no matter what happened in the chamber, was that we would really prioritize Minnesotans. We needed to make Minnesota an affordable place that people could afford their lives. We wanted to reduce mandates. Did we get everything done that we wanted to? No, we didn't, but we made a lot of great strides, both looking at that structural deficit, reducing that, and making sure that Minnesota families don't have the pressure of additional taxes on them this year. Really proud of the work that was done here with Leader Niska and Chair Torkelson, and together our team, along with all of our caucus members, are proud of the work that was done this year.
Will there be some lingering animosity over the undocumented immigrant issue that seemed to be the most contentious?
You know, we knew that was going to be a really hard issue. The first bill that we passed in the House chamber today was ending that insurance for undocumented people as of January 1st of 26. We knew that was going to be a hard decision, but when we looked at it and made the decisions that we needed to, also including a compromise of keeping undocumented children on until age 18, we knew it was going to be hard, but we were able to get that work done.
Do you agree with the characterization by the Democrats that the Republicans would not have allowed a budget to go forward without that compromise?
We know that this was a priority that we had, but we looked at the entire budget overall. From the time we started working the beginning of the session and started meeting with the governor, there was a push to increase revenue no matter what. That was our line in the sand. We were not increasing revenue as explained and as claimed to have been needed.
And what is your response, Madam Speaker, to the characterizing Republicans as cruel and not being fiscally responsible? The Democrats claim because of the cost shifting to hospitals.
You know, when we look at the work that was done over the last 2 years, as you have heard us say and Minnesotans know, we had a record surplus just 2 years ago, a record surplus that was spent, and taxes and fees on all Minnesotans was raised another $10 billion. Republicans, being in a tie, were able to accomplish much more, not as much as we wanted, but much more in making Minnesota affordable. We are not uncaring. We are looking out for the best interest of Minnesotans and being responsible with taxpayer dollars.
President Caucus said this morning that things that were offered were paid family and medical leave changes, earned sick and safe time changes, non-compete changes, and that the undocumented immigrant cuts were the hill that's, you know, so to speak, you guys were willing to die on. Is that a fair characterization?
We looked for changes in paid family medical leave and earned sick and safe time, and what was being proposed was talked about with a very high price tag of additional revenue. This was not the issue with the undocumented piece and what we were able to handle today. That was not the trade-off whatsoever.
Did we hear you say the first special session before you gavelled out there?
That's the official way that it's labeled.
Yes, yes.
I was like, because I was like, but okay, but on the broader point, do you think you're going to have to come back here if the Medicaid cuts that are being discussed at the federal level pass by the 4th of July?
I think what we need to look at is the work that was just done for the state of Minnesota. We were charged with doing a state budget for the people of Minnesota. That is what we have done. Depending on what happens at a federal level, if there are implications and effects here in the state of Minnesota, we'll take a look at that and the governor would be able to call us back. But right now we were able to complete the work for the state of Minnesota before July 1st, and there is no government shutdown.
I would say it does seem like the governor's national political aspirations might be pushing us towards him wanting to call us back into a special session.
How significant is it that you got a bonding bill passed this year?
I think bonding was something that was a real priority for all of the caucuses, and this is probably the best bonding bill that has been passed as far as a statewide impact, and there's not a lot of extra. It's roads, bridges, wastewater, those core things that need to be done for our state. It's a very good bonding bill, and I'm proud of the work that our teams have done together. It is very significant. We haven't had one for a couple of years, and it was very significant.
Leader Murphy at one point characterized the House as a two-headed monster. What do you say to that after the session ended?
I think we have proven here in the House that Democrats and Republicans can find a way to work together. A lot of the things that were wanted or desires by both sides, Democrats and Republicans, did not happen. It was a true compromise. I don't know how we're being characterized, but I know this was successful because we were able to get the work done, not quite on time, but before a government shutdown.
I'm sure there's bipartisan agreement over here that they're the real monster in the Senate.
Is there anything from like the co-chair model, the power sharing that you've learned from this year that you can implement next year?
I think the co-chairing and just the tie forced us to work together. And I think that's something that people outside of the bubble here in St. Paul are looking for people to do. They want representation in the state that can work together and do the best things for our state going forward. We were forced into that, and we've proven that there is a pathway through. Last session ended in such a frustrating way, even with a trifecta, but those on the minority and with closely divided government, it was very frustrating. There were times throughout this process that we got to be frustrated with each other all the way along the road rather than just having it all build up at the very end. We have proven that we can govern together.
Madam Speaker, you've touched, I think, on some of the things that were your greatest accomplishments of this session. Okay, maybe what's the number one greatest accomplishment, and what's your biggest disappointment in this session?
I think just having a budget that actually reduced spending in a common sense way and not raising taxes on Minnesotans, that was the best thing for all of Minnesota. When I think of the things that got left behind, meaningful changes to paid family medical leave are something that we heard from the business community across the state. Earned sick and safe time, another thing that is very difficult for businesses going forward. And so those are things that we really wanted to get done and make meaningful changes. We couldn't find bipartisan agreement enough to get those done.
The way the lawmakers got the work done in the past couple of weeks, can you talk about transparency, if you're hoping to change any of that going forward?
Sure. I think, when we have the issue of transparency and looking at when session ended May 19th, and we were going then from actually conference committees into working groups, people felt that there was less transparent ways of doing that. What I will say, though, is almost all of the provisions that were heard in these bills, as you heard Leader Niska, when we suspended the rules on every bill, talk about how long this language had been posted. And these were provisions that were heard in committees for the last 4 months. And so it wasn't that there were all of these new things done. It was just maybe a little bit harder for people to follow. Something, if there are ways to make it easier for the public, I'm all about exploring those options. But these were provisions that weren't just pushed through in the last few minutes. They've been heard throughout session.
What might be a specific example of how you've made Minnesota more affordable for people who live here?
Sure. Specific examples, do you want to touch on that?
Well, what we heard over and over again at the end of the debate tonight was that Democrats' solution to all of our problems was to raise more taxes, and we made sure that taxes were not increased on Minnesota families. That was the primary thing that we were able to get. There were things we pushed for in terms of energy affordability, that Democrats wanted to continue to have their slush funds for energy that raised Minnesotans' energy costs. So there were a few of those things that we were unable to get Democrats to agree on. The main thing was to make sure that we weren't increasing taxes on Minnesota families, which was, as we heard, the Democrats' solution to every budget problem.
Are you concerned about the increase in the tax on cannabis? I know that's not a family tax, but it's still something that could impact the black market. People might find legal cannabis unaffordable.
Well, I think that it ends up being comparable to what a lot of the other states that have legalized cannabis. It's where the governor, originally had proposed to set it. We're setting it. The market really hasn't rolled out yet legally, so we'll see how that goes, obviously, and go forwards. A lot of us had different views on whether to do that bill in the first place last session.
Thank you.
Thank you.